Welcome to the International Teacher Podcast with your host, Greg, the single guy, and Matt, the family guy. We're recording episodes from around the globe to tell you about the best kept secret in education. That's right, it's teaching overseas. We're glad to have you.
Hey, welcome to the International Teaching Podcast. I am Kent, the cat guy, and I'm here today with
Greg, the single guy, and I don't think Matt's here today. Matt's not here today. He's getting ready to do some travel this time. But, yeah, we do have a fantastic guest.
Who's our guest today, Greg?
Well, I'm going to let her introduce herself because she's been overseas for like 20 years. She needs to be doing this ITP instead of us, actually.
Oh, I don't think so. Well, thank you very much for the glowing recommendation of taking over ITP, but having listened to a number of episodes, there's no way I could do this professionally or amateurly, if that's a word. My name is Jacqueline Mallais, and I am an international teacher consultant for JPMint Consulting, which is actually just a fancy term for my own business. I help teachers update their CVs, their cover letters. I meet them in video calls and advise them on their next steps in the international teacher circuit. After 20 years, I feel like I have a little bit of experience to talk about, and I'm really happy to be here.
Great. I have a quick question for you. Yeah, thank you for joining us. You know, I noticed on your website, jpmint.consulting.com. Oh, I got it right. Yes, jpmintconsulting.com. You know, I noticed that you have a couple of master's degrees. I was wondering if you would tell us just a little bit about your educational background.
Yeah, so it's funny that the first master's was paid for by one of the international schools. So that's one of the top reasons to head overseas, is that you might be lucky enough to hit upon a school that will actually pay for your master's. And so that was at the University of California, Santa Barbara in 2006. I graduated with a French degree. That was always fun, trying to go through customs with my J visa, which is a student visa as a Canadian. They would look at me and go, can't you just get in here on your own? I was like, yes, but I have a J visa. You please stamp it. And then he would say, well, what are you studying? Well, I'm studying French at the University of California. Wait, you're Canadian and you're studying French in California? And they were so confused, and they would just let me go through. However, actually the last summer, I should say, I was held in one of these little rooms because I was each time coming in from Istanbul. And I think I was earmarked at that point. On the third summer, they were like, yeah, I don't know about this lady coming in from Turkey 3 summers in a row. And so I had to wait in that little room for a little while. But I was eventually released and got my suitcases and headed on to UCSB. And then my second master's was paid for by myself, but it was also an international overseas master's with the College of New Jersey, TCNJ. TCNJ has what are they called? Off campus, or, oh my gosh, I'm totally messing up what the name is, but they have schools that they borrow during the summertime. They use their facilities, and then they have the professors come in from New Jersey or actually all over the world. And they have teachers coming in from all over the world, and they offer masters of education in elementary education, secondary education. And for me, I took educational leadership so that I could get a principal's job. Oh, and that was 2016.
I think that the point that you made about going overseas and actually getting your master's and having it either at least offered like on the campus, like through Framingham does it. It's like a way that some international schools do it where they bring in the faculty for a cohort on their campus, or to go back in the States and do it over the summertime, even as a visiting Canadian. I love that idea that you brought that up because I haven't really talked about that a lot in the past or in the book or anything. And that's one of those key benefits. I definitely did the same thing. I got a master's through the opportunity that a school made. I paid for it and everything, but I didn't land at one of those great schools. Kent, did you get a master's degree after your general ed degree?
I did. I got my master's degree before I entered the classroom, which might have been a little premature. You have a little bit of experience helps, but I had done mine right after my certification, and I've really enjoyed it. I went to kind of a small hippie school in the United States, and I really enjoyed my time in teaching school. I taught for 6 years in the States and then off abroad. You know, after my time in Yemen, Jacqueline, I too have been to that little room and had a few questions. I've had some very weird experiences at airports, but once they've talked to you for a little while, they kind of get to know you, kind of know that you're a little bit harmless and kind of pass you through.
Yeah, unfortunately, it was LAX, and I did miss my connecting flight to Santa Barbara. But they have but they have so many different flights that I was just able to reroute quite easily. Did forget my carry-on though, so then that they had to send that on to the hotel that I was staying at that first night. And I told them, I made explicit instructions. Listen, I just came out from overseas. Please do not contact me. Just leave the suitcase outside my door. Of course, they knocked. Of course, they, tried to, so they had to rouse me up to get my carry-on.
So I don't usually get stopped on the way back, but being, after living in the Middle East, sometimes they stop you. And I remember distinctly, it was 2006, and I had gone home from Kuwait, and I had been teaching there from 5 to 7. And I remember distinctly, I was in the Green Bay International Airport, and they call it international because there's a gate that goes to Canada. I go into the terminal, I go through the security. This is in Green Bay, and the guy, there's no one else there. The guy looks at me and he goes, "Uh-oh." And I said, "Why are you uh-ohing me?" He goes, "Well, I'm sorry, dude." And I'm like, What? What's wrong? He goes, "You've been blue flagged." And I'm like, "What?" He goes, "You've been flagged." I said, "What does that mean?" He goes, "Well, dude, you're going to get stopped at every airport from here to your destination because you've been flagged for extra." He's like, "You just might have bent over and they're going to put on that old rubber glove and you're just going to just be ready for it. I'm just letting you know, come on through. I got to check you through, but you've been flagged." And I was like, "No way." Sure enough, that was a long trip. Every airport I was in, it was like, boom, bring him to the side room.
That's awful. That's awful when it happens because you immediately start thinking about, what did I do? And you start feeling guilty, thinking, I must have been wearing something differently, or I must have said something. And then, you just sort of go through your head thinking, why me? And then you realize, oh, wait, it's from my destination, or it's from my original point, or something like that.
Based on something that they don't know and they're not used to. And if you're going in and out frequently, they're going to want to know why, right? We can only say, I'm a teacher for so long before they start wondering, what do you really do, Like Kent looks like I'd stop him anyway, no matter what.
I get stopped. I get stopped every time. Jacqueline, you're a little bit like Greg and I. You see international teaching as a career, and you also see it as a labor of love to talk to other people about international teaching. Now, I know that Greg has hosted this podcast. He's written a book about international teaching. Now, I see that you have the website. What are some other things that are part of your labor of love to get the word out about international teaching?
Well, I think that very similar to Greg, one of Greg's podcast episodes, is that this is the best kept secret in education. And I wish that before teachers signed away their entire life for that retirement package, because I don't know about you guys, but in Ontario, the retirement package is crazy, but I call them golden handcuffs, where you essentially sign over your whole life, waiting for the moment when you get to retire and enjoy your life. And I thought there's got to be more to this. So before people start signing away their lives to do that, their 40 years or what have you in teaching, I wish they would go overseas to just experience, even if they experienced a 2-year contract somewhere exciting, somewhere new, they might be surprised to find out that they actually love this and this is what they were meant to do for the rest of their lives. Because that's what happened to me. I arrived in Istanbul and I got my schedule, and no lie, when I left Canada, I had 2 15-minute prep periods every other day, not even every day, 2 15-minute prep periods every other day. And when I got to Istanbul and I got my schedule, I said, what's all this white space? And they said, oh, that's your prep. And I had sometimes 3 to 4 periods a day of prep. And it made me realize that when we're overseas, we're so much appreciated for our expertise and our professionalism, so much more so than when we're in our home country. And I immediately called up my head of school who hired me. Actually, I'm going to give him a shout out, John Chandler from Carney Sando. So he hired me and I gave him a call. I said, John, can I just say, and I was in tears. I said, can I just say thank you? Thank you for hiring me. Thank you for bringing me on and giving me this chance. Because if I didn't take that leap of faith, I would never have discovered this whole world of teaching overseas, not just for the adventure of traveling. We're not backpackers, right? Greg, we're not backpackers. We like to travel, but it's not for that reason. It's to be appreciated. It's to pass on our expertise, our knowledge to students all over the world. That's what we're in it for.
Our listeners need to go to your website, and I hope that they log in and they can use your services, which you're definitely a service-oriented website, as well as giving out information. You're helping people, and I love this. So your website, which is JPMint.
JP.
I had it. Let me restart that again.
JPMintconsulting.com.
Yeah, there's no second dot. No second dot. JPMintconsulting.com. There you go.
There you go. Okay, JPMintconsulting.com. I went to that and I watched even the webinars that you have up there that you share. And before I continue with this, hey, Kent, ask me why she's called JP Mint.
Oh, Greg, why do you suppose she's called JP Mint?
Oh, funny you should ask me that, Kent, because in her webinar, she actually explains it. JPM are her initials, and then she did INT for international. So she's JP Mint. It sounds like a mint candy, right? I truly love your website. You've put it together to share all of your knowledge like we do on our podcast. And your webinars are out there for people to join. You help people with resumes when they want to hand them in, their CV or resume. You've got so much information on there about how to get ready for a job fair, what to do, how to get in touch with you, and different ways that you can help them.
And every week I add to it. It's never finished. I don't think I'm ever going to be finished. I have tips of the week, which have now run into every couple weeks, because at first I was just about getting word out there, getting information out there. But as life takes over and I get busy with clients and working on their documents, I update my I update my website about once a week, not less than that anyhow. So every week I try and get out either a blog article or a tip of the week. And the tips of the week are usually just very short and something about your CV or about your cover letter or about a website like you guys, ITP. I plugged you guys a couple weeks ago because I didn't know about it. I'm not a podcast kind of person, but I am slowly becoming one because I really enjoy walking through the Mexican forest here that's just outside my backyard and listening to you guys banter back and forth about international teaching. It makes my walk go so much faster. So I plug people's websites, or as people are letting me know about resources that they use out there, like Tony DiPrato's Pancake on a Stick, or Jess Gosling's Facebook group, New to International Schools Teachers group. And she's also written a book, but I try and put those resources on the websites for good. They're always going to be there. People can always load them up and check them out.
Question for you, Jacqueline. Kent here. Walk us through this a little bit. People will reach out to you through your website for consulting about international teaching? What kind of people are reaching out to you these days, and what do they have on their mind? If you could just walk us through, what is the typical person looking to get involved in international teaching like these days?
Well, I'm actually very surprised by my clients because I have yet to receive anybody brand new. So everyone that has reached out to me has been a veteran international teacher. And the reason they're reaching out to me is because they say, I feel like my CV is just a little old, a little dated, and I need something to sort of stand out, even with my experience. And I'm super excited to take these people on because they're the creme of the creme. They're just going to rise right to the top with a little bit of help, a little bit of tweaking in their CV and in their cover letter. And so that's what I work on, trying to get them noticed. But at the same time, I'm also excited to have a new to international teaching client. And so she's a little bit the litmus paper. Is that because I'm not a science teacher, but I think that's what it's
litmus
called.
test. Yep.
She's the litmus test.
Yep.
Because she will, by the time she finishes this school year, she'll have 2 years of international experience. And I think, it'll be very interesting, very telling where she goes and who she gets. And so I'm going to hold her hand the entire time. I put it this way. I wish I had somebody like me when I first went out there, because I'm happy to answer emails there's no such thing as too many questions when it comes to me. And so I'm going to be holding her hand and giving her sort of that guided step of, you want to avoid this particular country or these particular schools or this group or this or that, because I've got the experience, I've seen it, and I just want her to have the most successful second school ever. And so I'm very excited to see how she gets on with this process.
I hope that we can get her on this show at some point, because I would love to talk to a new teacher that's new into the field, especially if you're guiding her. And what I'm really excited about meeting you for is, it's just that we live very parallel lives. You and I and Kent and Matt, all four of us are very similar. We all do the same thing. We're overseas teaching. The one thing that sets you apart from us is that you have experience in admin. So the questions and some of these recruiting questions, you are coming from both sides of the table, right? So you did you go up into principal and farther, or did you stay at principal? Can you tell us a little bit about your experience in admin?
Yeah, and that's also why I include that as sort of part of my services in a sense, because I made that jump from teaching into admin. And it's a very tough jump. Let me just say, I was forewarned. I had a fantastic mentor in Keith Boniface, who has been an international teaching principal for over 20 years. And so Keith, shout out to you if you're listening to this. He told me, he said, admin, oof, it's a tough one. But once you get in and once you start building a reputation for yourself, then it gets easier. But you have to think about when you're a teacher and you're growing in years of experience and growing in years of the countries that you're visiting and the degrees that you're getting, and you climb that ladder, correct? And then when you get into admin, it's like, boom, you drop back to the bottom of the ladder and then you have to climb again. And at the top of your career, that's a big ego kicker. It's a kick to your ego. And I will say that it was a tough slog. It was a
make
tough
up a word.
It was a tough one. It was a tough one. So I took anything and everything that I could to make that jump. And so I was a dean of students in a school that will remain unnamed. And then I was a head of boarding. So I actually created my own position. I wanted to be the director of activities and the head of boarding. And so I went to this particular school in a particularly unnamed country. Actually, no, I can name the country. It was in China. So I went to this job fair in Toronto, and I said, I see you have 2 part-time positions. Any chance you could make this a full-time position for me? And she said, let's have a conversation. So I was her first interview the next day. And then I said, well, this is what I'm thinking. I start working at 2 p.m. and I finish at 11 p.m. And she said, would you want to do that? I said, yeah, for an experience, sure. And so that's what I did. I made the 2 p.m. so that I could join the meetings, and the meetings went until 4. And then at 4, the kids were released, released the beasts, and then they were mine. And from 4 to 11, I was working with them, teaching them how to sew, teaching them how to clean a toilet, teaching them how to cook. We had a couple bi-weekly cooking lesson on international cooking. So some of these things, actually, you see photos of that in my website. That was me teaching some of the Chinese students how to make kimbap from Korea. But I made my own position because it just didn't exist. I wanted that experience. And so I was head of boarding, and they gave me actually a super cool title, Director of Student Life. And it took me forever to learn how to say it in Chinese. And please don't ask me, because now I've totally forgotten how to
come
speak
on, do
Chinese.
it. Come on.
No, it was like,
title.
我是睡爽生活走天, or something like that. So the director of student life. And then I actually, I got locked out of China. Unfortunately, I lost a family member. My stepfather passed away unexpectedly, and I made the very hard decision to go home for the funeral during COVID, knowing that I might not get back in. And that's what happened. I didn't get back in. I lost my job. At that point, I was a vice principal at another school. So I did finish my contract at the first Chinese school, and was able to segue into vice principal. And then unfortunately, I lost that job because I couldn't get back. And then Mexico reached out to me. I actually put it out on Facebook. If you can believe, I got this job in Mexico thanks to Facebook. I put it out in many of the groups saying, I'm a 20-year veteran and I've got admin experience and I'm looking for a principalship. And they reached out and said, we'd like to interview you. And 9 days later, I had the job.
Congratulations. I love the idea of the fact that you're moving up from teaching. When you go overseas, you went overseas as a teacher and you worked your way into admin. And that's really one of the two prongs that I've seen. Sometimes you might work for a superintendent that started out in the States or in their home country as an admin, and then they're brought in as an admin for that school, whether it's principal or some kind of superintendent or something. That's very frequent. But you also have the strand, like you're saying, the homegrown, where those superintendents are grooming within their school to move other people up. And I love that. We see that a lot at school right now. I've seen it at other schools too, but I love the fact that you're bringing that up and you have that experience, because that is a benefit of going overseas. We know the superintendents in most cases. You're going over for dinner at a superintendent's house. You're hanging out with them. Maybe you're going on a boat with them. I can think of lots of experiences like that. Kent, how about you? Not here, but maybe in Yemen. Did you know their superintendent enough, like go over their dinner and anything like that? Did you have that experience?
Well, we were such a small school. We did everything together. It was your social group. We would travel together to the islands. We would go to dinners and picnics, and just about everything we did was with the superintendent on down.
Yeah, and they're your family. They're your family support. For example, I had some surgery in Oman when I was at the when I don't know if we want to mention the school, but I was at that school. Well, the American school. So I was at the American school in Oman, and I had surgery after being there 7 years. And they are the family that you wish you had, actually, because they took care of me. They brought meals over. They asked me, do you have any special dietary requests? They had a Google sheet that was organized, and I had meals, I had magazines, I had any number of things that I needed to be able to recover. And they just take you into your arms. And that's another perk of living and working overseas, is that you have your family back home, you have your friends from back home, but you have this core group that absolutely understand where you're coming from. And they never tire of your travel stories, because they know that's where they want to go to next. So, when we go home in the summertime and we're like, oh, this time in Bali or this time in Thailand, and they're like, oh God, another one of these stories. When you do this overseas, everybody's like, wait, let me get out my notebook. I want to take this down.
a lot of times the superintendent and their family are part of that family, at least a little bit. They're not, usually they separate from the staff, but they will have events or they'll have dinners, they'll have experiences, they'll join with us to do this. In my experience back 100 years ago in the States, when I was first, into the education stuff, and the teacher's like, oh my God, the superintendent's going to show up this week in our district. And I'm like, why are you all afraid? I just had dinner with one. I just interviewed with like 3 different ones, last weekend. For us, it's a whole different world. And it's because that school is your microcosm. And a lot of times those superintendents from an entire district in New York or something might come over and have one school, because they're not dealing with multiple schools as much as they are dealing with parents and government and board of directors and all the staff. Here's my other point, actually. I noticed on your website also is that you've said many times, we are the investment for the school, right? It doesn't matter if you're working for profit or nonprofit. The bottom line is that we are a big investment for the school as teachers that they're hiring. And I've said that many times too. The 3 of us, right? We are a big investment for the schools that we work for. So therefore, they're looking out for us in many respects. Not all the schools do, but the quality schools are putting everything into hiring the best teachers
and retaining
the right fit. Right, Kent?
www.amazon.com or wherever you buy your finer books.
I had to plug that one. I'm so sorry, Jacqueline. This is about you and about your website. I love it.
No, but you hit the right point. You also want to retain that staff. It's so important not only to hire the right people, but then to retain them, because you can grow as a school when you have staff that are staying on. I can't imagine, and I have actually taught and worked in schools where you have that 2-year turnover. You just don't advance to the point where you need to bring the curriculum into play. I mean, you're constantly retraining staff on your policies and your procedures and how to do things and how to get things done. Because if this 2-year turnover just keeps happening, you don't have any institutional memory except for maybe the local staff. And then the local staff get expat burnout. And I don't know if you guys have ever experienced or have seen that happen, but I've seen that happen in a few schools where the local staff are just saying, really, I'm going to have to train this person again because they're new and, okay, this is the way we do things. And you can just see they're totally disheartened.
Well, let me ask you about that. You've been in the business for 20 plus years, and you are, in my opinion, eminently qualified to talk to people about this business because you've seen so many different levels of it. First of all, how do you stay so positive and optimistic about it, particularly since, we all have our day jobs. Here we are going into November. It's been a long day. Maybe we've already put in 8 hours today. How do you keep that, positivity and optimism about this job?
I don't know. It's not a personality quirk. I think this is it. This is what everybody should be working towards is heading overseas, learning about each other's culture, learning each other's languages. It brings, I don't want to sound kind of rainbows and unicorns, but it brings everybody together. Like when I see a news story, it's likely going to be in a country I've actually visited and I have friends that live there, Ukraine being one of them. So we want to head overseas to experience the world, to give of our expertise, but also to bring us closer. We're just all one big family with a lot of different skin color and a lot of different hair color, or maybe lack of hair in some cases.
Are you talking about Kent?
Oh, yes.
Oh, I've got plenty of hair. I might be half Japanese, but I got the Indiana genes here somewhere. Okay, let me ask you this, Miss Jacqueline. So let's say I reach out to you and I say I'm interested in international teaching. What are some of the things that you're going to want to know about me? What are some of the things that you look for to let someone know, hey, you know what, you might really love this job?
I'm glad you asked, because unfortunately I can't take everyone on. simply because I'm trying to make sure that they can get a job. So if I take you on, it means that I can get you, I can get your foot in that door, or I can get you moving up in the international circuit. But in order for that to happen, you need a teaching certificate. I cannot work with somebody that's had oodles of experience. Maybe they've, been in the teaching game for a number of years. But when I look at their CV, I look at their education, and they just have a BA, or they just have maybe even just community college, and they don't have a teaching degree. I immediately tell them how to get the teaching degree. And so I can help them that way, and that sort of point them in the right direction. But I need that basic requirement, simply so that, because I know that schools, the good schools that I want my clients to get to, those schools need a teaching degree. And very often they need 2 years of experience in your home country or overseas. It doesn't matter, but they do want to see some experience. But actually, some schools are still open to taking brand new graduates out of quality teaching degree universities. So I have a number of friends who've managed to go straight from their Bachelor of Education into an overseas position. But that's because they're coming from a really quality education background. So if you have a teaching degree, then yes, please reach out to me, because then we can talk about what are your next steps.
20 years ago, I know when you started back in 2002, I started in 2001. So back in 2000, I wish you had been around. There was nothing. There was nothing to get me ready for it. I heard about international teaching. I mean, long story short, it was just like a conversation at a party one night. They said you should go to Iowa. I'm like, what? International? There's corn in Iowa. There's no. What do you mean international? They're like, go to this university thing and I don't know, Google it. So when I finally did go to the UNI, I had no preparation. I had nowhere to go for help. Here you are. You're reaching out, and here's a website that you put together, all of your experience behind it. I wish they had that back then. Back then, after I learned more about it, after getting my job and going overseas, I started to learn about TIE Online. I started to learn about Search Associates. I started learning about the recruiting fairs. There were still no books out there. There was just the things that they write, that the universities and the job fairs actually write for you, like information booklets. There was nothing except those things out there. And then ISR came out, of course, and you've mentioned that on your web.
Yeah, I've been a member since they've started, 20 years.
We learned to take it with a grain of salt.
Mm-hmm.
Here's something for you to add to your website. It's called International School Community.
Oh, I know about them.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
You do? Okay. And he was interviewed on our show too. He's put it together. It's just a small business for him, but he's reaching out and giving out all this information. But this is another beautiful website. You can be an ambassador, so you can talk about your school and then earn back the amount that you might have to pay to be a member of his website. In fact, you might be a great ambassador for Mexico, right? For your school, for your area. Kent might go on there with his cat about Yemen. We are, as a group, we are reaching out and trying to help people because we know that there's a caveat. There's this little niche of people that are interested in how do you get into it. It's a great secret. But how do we get them, move them the next step forward? I'm so happy that you found us and talked about this. And you just got done talking with Audrey and David, who are going to be, they're going to be doing a website and a podcast coming up, hopefully in December.
Educators Going Global.
Exactly. Nice plug right there. Kent and I are supposed to talk to them in a couple of days. They're going to come onto this show, and we're going to talk to them and get their side of the story. So, Jacqueline, you can listen to that episode too and find out some more inside stuff about David and Audrey.
I'm so excited for this world of podcasts. And, the other thing I just discovered, Reddit. Okay. I mean, I've always heard of Reddit for memes and some off-color conversations, but there's actually r/international teachers. And I've been going on there as my little icon is JPMint Consulting, because I'm not allowed to plug my website, but I want people to go to my website for information. I don't necessarily need everybody to hire me. I just want people to go there and see what's out there. They can
JPMintconsulting.com.
They can see, exactly. They can see my blogs, my tips, r/international teachers in the Reddit group. There's a couple of, I can tell there's a couple of veterans. I don't know if you guys in there, because there's a couple of veterans in there that have really good, solid advice. And they have this thing, I never heard of it, but they call it upvoting. And you just click on the arrow and then that comment goes to the top. And it's so exciting when I write a comment and I get upvoted. I'm like, oh, this like little kudos.
You've been uploaded?
Why, is that a rare thing?
I don't know anything about it. I'm not a Reddit guy. Kent, are you a...
Yes, I am a Reddit guy. Yes.
Have you been voted up?
No, I'm more of a consumer than a producer when it comes to Reddit, but I do follow that. I think I have checked out the International Teacher section of Reddit, and I'm always looking for great sources.
I think they call you lurkers.
Lurkers, yes, I'm definitely a lurker.
He's on there for cat stuff and for manga.
For manga, definitely manga.
He's a big fan of manga, and if you haven't read any manga, you need to start reading it. He's turned me on to it. It's fantastic, right? That and Cat Fancy Magazine, I think Kent is a writer for that, too. Probably been upvoted for... What do you think, Kent? Oh, my gosh.
I do watch Jackson Galaxy videos because he's like the cat expert, so... You've gone to me.
Well, I'm going to get on to Reddit. That's a great resource.
It's something I just learned about.
What is your feel for our industry? Is it growing? Are there young teachers who are trying to jump into this business? What is your feel for the pulse of international teaching? You've been in it a long time. Now, I suspect when you started, it was probably still a great unknown. But I think, wouldn't you say, here we are 20 years later, what kind of progress has been made getting the word out about international teaching over the 20 years you've been in this business, or over the 20 years that you've been in this business?
I think sadly, it's still not a common thing. You know, you go to family barbecues and they say, oh, my son's teaching overseas. And I get all excited. Oh, where is he? Well, he's teaching English in China, or he's teaching English in Korea, or he's teaching... And you're thinking, wow, I did that over 20 years ago. They're still doing that. Like, that's what they think international teaching is. They have no idea about the quality schools that you, Greg, that we've worked at, the quality professional development that goes into our career. They don't think of it as a career. They think we're just these wild backpackers going from job to job, you know, every 6 months or something. No, that's not. This is international teaching and then some. You know, this is the creme de la creme. And I'm sad to say that I still don't think teaching universities know about us. They don't know to pass this information on. And I would love to get into that niche and just let those students know you could become an international teacher. You don't need to stay in Green Bay, Wisconsin, or Kansas, Missouri, Kansas. You can, is it Kansas, Missouri, Missouri, Kansas? I always get those two confused.
Kansas, Missouri.
Thank you.
Right?
You don't need to stay in these places.
Kansas City, yes.
Missouri. Yeah. You don't need to stay in these places if you don't want. That might be something that you're interested in. But if you're looking for something a bit more exciting, if you're a bit more adventurous, especially somebody in their 20s, this is it. Do this now before you start to settle down and have your children and have your family and your 6-person minivan. It's time to check out the world and see that maybe this is something that you can do long term. I know many, many families that have something called a TCK, What is the TCK?
Third culture kid.
Hey, see, I'm still a teacher. So third culture kid, where you have raised your child in a third culture, the host country, what have you. They feel like they're part of their parents' culture, but in the summer times only. And then I think Matt's kids probably are TCK kids, right?
They are. Yep.
Yeah.
And so is Julia. Julia is one of our, she's been on here twice now, and she's a third culture kid, and she started, and we're going to plug her again. She has started her podcast called Across Oceans. It's hosted by Julia. She is a third culture kid. I remember her from when I knew her parents, and I saw her in like piano recitals and stuff when we were teaching in Egypt together back in 2004. I agree with you, Jacqueline. I would love it if universities would start offering or start sharing the knowledge of the fact that we're out here, that there are international jobs for teachers. But I also think that universities, their jobs are basically to feed the machine. They're feeding into the schools, not necessarily the private schools, but the state schools are in the U.S. are feeding into the machine of, let's give more teachers back to our district. Let's get, most of our people are not going to leave the state. They're going to teach within this city, right? Kent is a good example of that. Kent did all his, you did your education in Washington, and then you taught in Seattle, right? You and Carla both, your wife. You went to university, and right after you graduated, you started looking for a job. They hired you, and you go into the machine, and then you're sort of there. And I don't think everybody's ready to get up and leave their family, because we are special people. We are the world travelers, and we're not just tourists, like you say. And I borrow from Anthony Bourdain. We're travelers. We're not tourists. We're international educators. We're not just teachers. So we are willing to leave our families for in the States or bring family with us. And we're willing to leave our friends because we know our quality friends will still be back home when we come back. And we're willing to go see the world and bring it back and share that with the world. And we change one kid at a time over, I'm speaking for myself now, but I change one kid every day in my own way instead of feeding into the machine back in the States. And I think that was just my 2 cents on it. I think that it would be great if we could get more word out there at the universities, but there's a reason that they're not all, sharing this. And we are fighting against this big wave of new teachers that are coming up to be teaching in the U.S. I have so many friends that have never left the county, that have never left the state, that think that going to Chicago is the vacation, right? Or going to Mexico. They don't have passports, right? We tend to forget this when we live overseas. But back at home, I totally understand it. That's my 2 cents on why we're still a secret. But I think the challenge is for all of us that are trying to give back, with your website, with the book, with the ITP, with the other podcasts coming out, it's sharing the knowledge for those few people that are willing to go overseas and make a commitment to it.
Yeah, and let's be clear, it doesn't take a special person. Like sorry to burst your bubbles, guys, but we're not special. We're not especially talented in certain areas to be able to do this. I would say that we're risk takers. And so you've just got to keep an open mind, be optimistic, go with your heart full and your mind wide open to new experiences and see what's out there. But it doesn't take any special skills. It doesn't take any, I would say, life or advent. I'm not a bungee jumper. I'm not a jumping out of an airplane kind of a risk taker. I just really enjoy traveling and learning new things. So if you're actually, how we're always talking about lifelong learners. If you're a lifelong learner, then this is it for you. You should try this out because you will never stop learning overseas.
Kent, I know you want to respond to that. Here's a piggyback on what you just said, Jacqueline. We're also not special. Like, we don't speak multiple languages right out the bat either, right? The average international teacher is not going to just start flipping out the Spanish that or the language of the Japanese that Kent is learning now, right? We don't just throw out languages. You don't have to be a language person we are just teachers. I tell people back, they're like, how do you get into that? You have to speak, do you speak the local language? I'm like, no, I'm a third grade teacher. I'm just like that teacher 2 blocks away at your elementary school in, whatever, around the park there in Seattle. And there's a little, Jefferson Elementary or whatever. It's been there since the 50s. And there's teachers that have been there since the 50s. Well, I'm the kind of teacher that should be there, but I just got up and left and went overseas. And I'm doing the same thing they're doing. That third grade classroom around with Mrs. Spratt or Mrs. Johnson, I'm doing the same thing. I've been in Kent's classroom so many times. 4th grade Kent, right? You're doing that same thing that you were doing in Seattle back in the day. You're a 4th grade teacher. He just happens to be a wonderful traveler too, right?
And with an open mind to the cultures and the languages and the backgrounds of your students, because in some cases, you might be teaching a class. I mean, I remember my first international school, because there are different types of schools out there, local schools, international schools. But I remember walking into my first international classroom. It was a rainbow of colors. It was a myriad of nationalities. There might have been 20 students, and in 20 students, there was 18 nationalities. And you have that richness of their background, their family history to bring into the classroom. So you keep an open mind. You cannot teach exactly the same, in the sense that you're not going to talk about that little park around the corner from Seattle and tell them this. They'll be like, "Where's Seattle? Oh wait, is that Grey's Anatomy?" But so you might have to fine tune your lesson planning or lesson, the way you teach things. But so often you will actually be the one that's also getting taught. You're getting so much richness and culture from your students and background and information, that with the open mind, this is the best kept secret for sure.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, I think that in order to be successful in this business overseas, you've got to love teaching. If you're sitting around the United States and you don't love teaching, above and beyond all the challenges of teaching in the United States these days, if you don't love the students that are in front of you, if you don't love the job, 4:30 in the morning is exactly as early in Saudi Arabia, in Mexico, in Kuwait as it is in Seattle, because you got to get up in the morning, you got to put your clothes on, and you got to go into the office and you got to do your job. You got to love the job first, because not all those other things aren't a lot easier. Still got to do the dishes and the laundry. And I was just thinking that this is the time of year, we're almost 2-3 months into the year where sort of the newness of the year is worn off. After a couple of years, the newness of your country wears off a little bit. And you've got to, I think what makes an international teacher special in some ways is, number one, they love teaching. And number two, they find something each and every day to make it new and exciting, or to keep that outlook going and growing. And I find myself kind of pumping myself up in the morning when that alarm clock goes off. It's so easy to just want to kind of fall into the doldrums. But I think trying to stay on top of your game is a real skill and a real talent. And as we go into November and December, that's when I really got to remind myself, I love this job. I love these kids. I actually love the country that I teach in. There's a lot of people, I'll be honest with you, if you can't find something to love about where you live and you work, it's going to be very hard to want to get up each and every day and do this job well.
Yeah, I've been very lucky in my destinations, my host countries, as you call them as well. I've been very lucky that I have absolutely loved my countries, living in them. The first one in Turkey, I stayed 8 years at the same school. And then the second one was Oman, and I stayed 7 years, because I absolutely loved working at these places. I loved waking up every morning, seeing the students, but also the outside of the school. When we're finished our school day, what is your day going to look like? So is it going to be adventure filled? Going to the grocery store is an adventure, right? You're trying to find something, you want to make something from back home. You're like, I just need some yeast. I have no idea how to buy yeast in Oman, but I'm going to try. And so you're, walking up the baking aisle. That's an adventure in itself. So you find the little things that are a joy every day. And that's one of the reasons why we are overseas, is for that adventure and loving the country that we're in.
Yeah, I sense Kent being a little bit upset. He sounded a little bit down after you said he wasn't special. Should we give Kent, you're special, Kent. You're very special, Kent.
I was over here searching on the internet, why am I special, so I could retort.
Jacqueline meant that we're like other teachers, Kent. We're not special like we have to be some kind of superhero. You do in order to be a teacher, though. I think that's great. By the way, listeners, the cat keeps on going in front of Kent's face and flipping the little the tail up. I love that, Kent. We never talk about your cat on this podcast.
Oh, she knows what time snack time is, and she knows I'm late. So that's a little bit of irritation going on there.
How about some final kind of advice for teachers coming into this or out there already? Just to leave us with a little bit of advice, and then we'll chime in a little bit with Kent.
I'm a logistical person. I'm a nuts and bolts kind of a person. So I'm going to talk about your CV. I'm going to say that lose the Canva, lose the high graphics, the 7 different colors, the 2 different fonts, the bolds, the italicized. Keep it simple. There's a reason why we say keep it simple, stupid. Now putting on my admin hat, we want to see, what do you have? What is your education? What is your experience? How do we contact you? And what are your interests? Who are you outside of teaching? Because it's funny, I was working on a CV the other day that somebody who's never been overseas, and she was surprised. She was like, wait, I need to put a photo? Yes, you need to put a photo. Wait, I need to put who I am, like what I do outside of teaching? Yes, because the school is not hiring just a teacher. They're hiring a person who has interests, who has perhaps a family. So you're writing that information in there. You're putting in your passport, because they need to know if they can hire you, if they can get a work visa for you. So keep all that information so crystal clear and simple, so that the head of HR or the head of school or the superintendent looking at your CV can find it quickly and put you on the yes pile. So that's my tip of the day.
Kent, any comments about that? How's your resume looking?
I often joke, and I don't know how true it actually might be. I was hired pretty late in the cycle. And so I figured, and we're talking 10 years ago now that I went through this process the last time, we figured that they needed one more teacher, and they just grabbed the first resume that was left on the pile. I think they reached for the wrong pile. And by the time they reached out to me and wanted to interview me, I think they discovered it was a little too late to kind of take that back. So my resume is not that bad. I do like to keep it simple, and I like who I am and what I've done to try to speak for itself. But I'll be honest with you, I don't think that I stand out a lot more than other candidates. I don't mean to beleaguer the point, but I think I'm better in person than I am on paper, and probably most of us are. I think that's probably true, and I think that I would do best when I actually am in person. My job that I got hired for 10 years ago was all online. I never did the fair for this job. It was kind of that last minute hire late in the season. I think it was February, because where I'm at is a multi-month long process. So if they don't make the offer and reach out in February, they'll never be done by June or July. So that was late in the process. But I feel pretty good about it. I'm happy where I'm at, but I'm also feel anxiety. I don't know if Jacqueline, if you've ever felt this. I mean, you're eminently qualified, but I think even the most experienced international teachers have some level of anxiety going through that process of sending your resume out, being judged, being looked at. Like you said, like almost like you've never done this job before. You're almost like brand new, and you are brand new to that school. And I think there's a certain level of anxiety to that. And I don't know. I think that's all. That process in front of all of us probably 1 or 2 more times. But I can't help but feel like, wow, that's a tough process.
Well, and we are all better in person because we're teachers. We don't teach through paper. We teach through face-to-face, or, well, in some cases online, but we are better in person. But how do you get in that interview, where you can shine? And a lot of it is coming down to keeping it. So you said, I'm not so great on paper. Actually, you can be great on paper. In fact, a lot of my clients say, oh my gosh, I read so well. Like one of my latest clients that have never been overseas, they're from England, and they said, I can't believe how good you made us sound. It's not that I made you sound good. You are good, but you just need to know how to sell yourself and package yourself in 2 pages. I think that we need to recognize our achievements and put those forward. It's not braggadocious to put all your achievements on a 2-page resume or a CV, and then get that foot in the door so that you can shine in your interview. I have had very few interviews where I haven't gotten the job, but I have applied for many jobs where I didn't get the interview. And so you want to get that interview so that you can then get the offer, right? That's kind of the way it happens.
If I heard you right, you said you've applied for lots of jobs that you haven't gotten interviews for, but there's very few jobs you've interviewed for that you haven't gotten.
Exactly.
Is that how you said that?
Because we shine. We do. We're teachers. We shine when it's our personality comes out through the interview process. Your personality doesn't necessarily come out through the CV, and maybe it shouldn't, in the sense that the little flowers or the graphics that you put, or God forbid it's an electronic CV and you've got swirling things or, GIFs or something in your CV. You want to keep it really straightforward, printable as well. So, think about what the print version of your CV looks like. If the HR is going to print out a stack of CVs, what is that going to look like? But how do you get from the CV to the interview process? And it's shining, showing a spotlight on what makes you unique in your experience, your background, your education. And there's always something. I'm always finding something super unique about my clients. And there's always something unique about every candidate that faces me with their CV and their cover letter. And it's just, how do you highlight that so that when the head of school or the superintendent is reading it, says, oh my gosh, I want to learn more about this person, and offers an interview.
I'm pretty sure I haven't had anybody look at my resume. I've always felt like my resume is strong and I'm going to send it out there. Just this week, I announced that I'm not coming back next year. I'm going to go to a recruiting fair. I'm looking for a new job. So I think this is a perfect opportunity for me to invest in some time and go on there. I did sign up for your website blog so I can get updates. But I think this is the perfect opportunity for myself and for our listeners to get some feedback on what you think is a powerful 2-page resume, CV, curriculum vitae.
And cover letter. Don't forget, the letter of introduction is very often overlooked. We don't read it as admin. We don't read it with a fine tooth comb, but we do scan it. And so I can help with that as well, because I know exactly what people are looking for in the decision-making offices. The most common mistake, and I'm guilty of this as well, the most common mistake with a cover letter is going through your CV and talking paragraph by paragraph what you've done. That is the biggest mistake. So if you want to know exactly what needs to be in your cover letter, there's some tips on my website, and also hire me.
Do you have a letter, Kent? I don't even have a letter. I've never had a letter.
I've got several letters. I don't know if I'd include them in anything. Help me out here, Jacqueline. Now, once an international teacher gets to the point where they think to themselves, it's time for me to move on, have you ever met with a client or talked to a client and said to them, you know what? Do you want to tell me a little bit more why you want to move on? Because it seems like it's pretty good. I mean, have you ever, listen, it's a little personal for me because I've spent many hours trying to convince my co-host Greg here to stay where we're at. It might be a little self-serving, but on the more serious side, have you ever advised a client just to stay?
I have not. I have not. Because
Sorry, Kent, she won't help you out, but
in the end, when that sort of doubt or that question kind of enters your head, you would never consider it, really. I don't think you would ever consider leaving if you wanted to stay. But the minute you start to think about, I wonder what else is out there,
that's when it's time to go.
I will say this. I have a friend who has a fantastic job that, full disclosure, I helped his CV. I helped him. I coached him in an interview process. He has a fantastic job and he loves it. And he's in his second year and he decided to move on. And I said, what happened to your 5-year plan of staying at this school? He said, it's just the minute it got in my head, like there's so many new jobs opening up. How can I not try this? And I said, you see, so in the end, he was super happy and he loves his job. He loves his students and where he is. But when that little seed of doubt germinates, you can't deny it, that you need to see what's out there.
I didn't coach her before this interview, Kent. This is news to me. And she's not talking about me, but she is talking about the same way I feel, right? And Kent and I have been talking about this because I wasn't sure. And I finally made that decision this week, talked to my bosses because I like to be transparent. I'm very grateful because it's timely to have you on here from my personal situation. It's timely for the people that are looking at going overseas that haven't even thought about it, but just heard about it. And I think that you're a great starting point for the logistics of getting into this. And I love it that you're on here. Kent and I have had a lot of fun. I can tell Kent's laughing right now. He's having a great time with this. But
well, I think not only are you a professional and you're great at your job, you're just a very nice person. So
me?
I would not hesitate.
Oh, Jacqueline.
Maybe. I would not hesitate, Jacqueline, to send a new or experienced teacher to you and your website, jpmintconsulting.com. You have a tremendous experience, and you seem like a really nice, wonderful person. So thank you for joining us, and I'm really excited you're out there. So thank you, and I'm sure we'll get a chance to talk again in the future. So thank you.
I would be happy to come on. I feel like we've just hit, we've scratched the surface of some things that I can help your listeners with. I would be more than happy to come on again and continue to scratch a little bit below the surface and give them more tips and more advice on how to get out there and how to be seen and how to highlight their uniqueness.
Well, we might have to ask Matt. Maybe we can be like ITP. It could be Matt the family guy, Kent the cat guy, Greg the single guy, and Jacqueline the consultant woman. What do you think? No, maybe that's too much.
Got a good ring to it.
I still have to add Kent to our ITP with the parrots. I have to add a third parrot somehow. So I'm in the process of that. But in all regards,
or a cat.
In all seriousness,
what about his cat?
Oh, that
two
put
parrots
a cat between
and his
the two.
Cat.
Two parrots and a cat.
Over with the cat. Oh my God! See, this is
You
why
heard
you're the
it here,
consultant,
listeners.
right?
You heard
You
it
hit it
here.
here
When
first.
you see the new
That's
logo,
right. The birth of a new logo.
Two parrots and the little cat head popping up. You heard it here.
I love this episode, and I can't wait to talk to you again. We'll get you back on the show. Thank you so much, Jacqueline, for joining us. Kent, do you want to give us the outro?
This is Kent the cat guy.
And Greg the single guy.
And Jacqueline from JPMint Consulting. Thank you so much for having me on the show. I really enjoyed it. The time has absolutely flown.
Thank you both. And until next time, class is dismissed.
Oh, he did it. I love it.